All right, guys, what's up? Welcome after many months, finally, a new episode of the MLB Hall of Pretty Good podcast. I am Bryce, and I am returning to the podcast game, but I am not alone. Today, I have Ethan from Glovehound with me, and I'm very excited for him to join me. Ethan, how's it going?
Going great, Bryce. Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Of course, man, happy for you to be here. And I mentioned you're from Glovehound, and so could
Yes.
you explain to us what Glovehound is? Because I'm sure there's people who don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a baseball glove repair shop. So, as you know, baseball gloves have laces, and those laces break pretty often. So, I clean the gloves, condition them, put new laces in them, do minor stitch work, if necessary. And yeah, it's just something I started in high school, and it's a bigger need than I thought it was. And so I've been able to. I've been very blessed to be able to help a lot of players here in the Cincinnati area locally, all over the country, and I think we're up to three different countries now.
That's fantastic. And you help people from all levels of the
Yep.
MLB, amateur, it doesn't matter. You've had some pretty special people you've worked on gloves for too, haven't you?
Yeah, 100%. So my first, I guess you could say, big client was Sandy Leone. I know you're familiar, being
Love
a
him.
Red Sox fan. It was so funny. He found me on Instagram, and I remember I got the message. We were eating at Red Squirrel after church, and I got a DM, and it said Sandy Leone, and I was like, holy crap! I was like, I know exactly who that is. And I just remember, you know how you did the video on Brett Lowry, right?
Yes.
And you remember how you said he just looked cool?
Yep.
Okay, Sandy Leone just looks cool.
He does.
He looks like an absolute boulder with a big thick beard. And I remember watching him catch in the World Series, and I was like, that guy is sick.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he sent me a glove, and I got to do it. I had to do a little stitch work, send it back, and I kept posting to social media, and then eventually Jose Trevino reached out to me via Instagram and sent me his catcher's mitt. I relaced, clean condition, and relaced that one. And then later in the year, after the All-Star break, while he was on the injured list, he sent me his game glove, and I just cleaned and conditioned that one for him. But I got to hold his his platinum labels and everything, his gamer gloves. So that was pretty cool. But those are few and far between. I'm mostly doing stuff for youth kids around the area, high school, college, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely still incredible though, and like you said, Sandy Leone. I mean, he had one of the better seasons in recent memory for a Red Sox catcher. I believe it was 2016.
Yeah,
He was a
for
guy who
sure.
definitely could play. And then
No doubt.
Trevino, another one, an all-star. It's really cool.
Yeah, and it was wild because now Trevino's headed here to Cincinnati,
Yep, he
which is
is.
pretty cool. So yeah, you never know if that'll lead to anything else, but yeah, I did send him a message. I said, hey, I'm 20 minutes north of the stadium if you ever need anything. And he was like, okay, cool. So,
Yeah,
but
why
just
not?
crazy coincidence for sure.
Speaking of Cincinnati Reds catchers, you actually gave us a perfect segue. We threw a couple names out there and we decided on one. Who are we going to talk about today on this comeback episode?
We were talking about the man, Devin Mesoraco.
Yes, Devin Mesoraco. I think it's a guy that almost every baseball fan knows about. They know the name Devin Mesoraco, I'd say.
Should know
Yeah.
about him, no doubt.
We'll get into it, obviously, but definitely some of the hardest luck from out of any player in terms of injury history that I've ever seen.
Yeah, dude. I looked at his at the transactions just on and off and on and off, and I'm sure we'll dive deeper into that later. But yeah, heartbroken that gone a little too soon from the game in a playing sense, but. I really do think he left his mark in quite a few ways, and he continues to coaching it at Penn State, or no, Pitt. I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Oh no, that's fine. Yeah, it's great that he's still involved in the game because I could totally see somebody like him with all his injury history almost resenting baseball to a certain degree.
Sure.
It's got to take a toll mentally on you to go through what he went through.
Yeah, 100%. And I watched a couple interviews that he did, and he does talk about that. Like, it was just it was really, really hard on him. And he said it got to the point where he just couldn't perform physically anymore. And
Yep.
I got to give props to him for being really realistic about it and kind of calling himself on that. But not only just being injured and having to come back, but the time away, he did say that his skills just deteriorated from not getting those reps. So no doubt in my mind that was the biggest contributor to his downfall for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's cool to hear what you said about having that self-awareness. Sometimes I feel like some athletes don't have that type of self-awareness, and they can't really tell when their time is up. And so it seems like he did know he was done, and that's when he chose to walk away.
Yeah, you got to respect that hard decision for sure.
Yeah, as far as potential goes for Devin Mesoraco, obviously you think of Cincinnati Reds catchers, you think Johnny Bench. I don't think he had quite that potential, but I definitely think he could have been just a tier below it. Like, I really think he had all the tools.
Yeah, no doubt. And he trust me, he was drawing plenty of comparisons to the great Johnny Bench as he was really hitting his stride, especially in that 2014 season.
So you are a Cincinnati Reds fan, correct?
I am. As painful as it has been, for sure, I am. So I'm just 20, 30 minutes north of the stadium. So I didn't go to games all the time, but I did go to a handful. And for whatever reason, like 90% of the games I went to, Bronson Arroyo was pitching, which is kind of funny.
Awesome leg kick.
Yeah. And well, I should say country music star Bronson Arroyo.
Yes, he does make some music, doesn't he?
He does. But yeah, so I was a catcher growing up until high school, and so I was always, I'm looking at the local team's guy, and for the longest time it was Ryan Hannigan.
Yes.
And no disrespect to Ryan Hannigan, but I wouldn't exactly. Swag is not the first word that comes to mind when I think of Ryan Hannigan. Okay.
Yes.
No disrespect. He carved out a long career and made an impact that I don't think is fully appreciated. But he had the hockey style helmet that we see all the time now. Mesoraco oftentimes wore the 2-piece. I thought that was so cool. And then the other big thing is Mesoraco was an offensive catcher, and that. I don't know. It just those guys get noticed more because they're so loud with the bat, and Ryan Hannigan never really was. And so getting to see the offensive guy, a guy who could hit and call a good game behind the dish. I mean, that was who I wanted to be as a young catcher in Cincinnati for sure.
Definitely, that totally makes sense. It feels like good offensive catchers are maybe like once every 15 years for each team. They have one guy maybe every 15 years. I mean, it really is hard to find a catcher that can swing it. You look at somebody like Martin Maldonado, he's still finding MLB jobs, despite the fact that, I mean, we could probably put up his numbers offensively, if I'm being honest, because of how good he is with the glove. So that just tells you how valuable offensive-minded catchers can be.
Yeah, no doubt, for sure.
And so looking at Devin Mesoraco, the first thing that jumps out to me personally, he's only 36 years old at the time of this recording. There's a world out there where he's still playing today, possibly.
Yeah, no doubt. And when we get to talk about the draft, there are guys in that draft that are still producing in this league at this moment. Okay, so like you are so right. We could there's an alternate universe where Devin Mesoraco is still putting up crazy numbers somewhere.
I gotta be honest, I wish we lived in that universe, man. I'd love to see more of Mesoraco.
For sure.
So going to that draft, he was taken 15th overall in 2007 by the Cincinnati Reds. First overall pick in that draft. How about it? David Price. That's a fun name to talk about.
Absolutely.
What other names did you see that maybe jumped out to you from that draft?
Well, I copied down a big list. So I'll try, just to rattle off some of them. Well, Mike Moustakas was really early. Orioles catcher Matt Wieters, another great underrated catcher.
Yes, I always like to say Matt Wieters was like the prototype for what Adley Rutschman is now. Switch hitting catcher. Yes, great pick there.
For sure. Madison Bumgarner, big name there.
10th overall.
Jason Hayward. and then a guy, JP Arancibia. Okay, I got another name that does not get appreciated. But you know what? The only jersey baseball card I ever got was a JP Arancibia Toronto Blue Jays
Really?
card with a little bit of his jersey, and I had no idea who he was at the time. And I can't say I followed him very much, but I have a jersey cutout card of his. So
Arancibia, he really had some pop. He would strike out a ton, but he really could hit the ball out of the park. That's one thing I know about him.
Then we have Cy Young winner Rick Porcello.
Yes, one of my favorite players ever. I've got his bobblehead somewhere there right behind me, actually. I love Rick Porcello.
For sure. We have future teammate Todd Frazier.
Yes.
Future teammate both on the Reds and on the Mets. Another catcher, Travis d'Arnaud.
Mm-hmm. He's a guy still playing today.
Who's still playing, yeah, absolutely. Is Jason Hayward still around?
He had some time last season with the Astros, so I mean he's still a free agent right now. But I assume if the phone rang, he'd pick it up.
Absolutely, and then because I know Price, Bumgarner, Moustakas, is Porcello still around?
No, he is not.
Okay.
He kind of got a rough stint with the Mets. Kind of just took him out of the league.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I can't say I followed him super closely.
Wasn't very exciting, but he's one of my favorites.
But a lot of these guys are freshly retired, if not still playing. Sean Doolittle, another catcher, Josh Donaldson.
I was wondering if you were going to catch that. Yes.
Yeah, at the beginning at least. Man, he's one of those guys. Would you say that? Do you think he's stuck around too long?
Josh Donaldson, maybe a year or two, but I don't know. Like he would keep reviving his career like that. I remember that Atlanta Braves season. I kind of thought he was on the decline, and then he really brought it back there. And I think that gave his career 2 or 3 more years of life. So I'm not sure. But yeah, the end was a little rough with the Yankees and then the Brewers, I believe, to finish it up. That was
so weird. Him on the Brewers was one of the weirdest immaculate grid pulls. Like, I don't remember if I think I missed it and his name popped up and I was like, that's not real. Like, I don't believe that.
In 10 years, nobody's going to remember that. It's just not.
I'm going to tell my kids, oh, remember when Josh Donaldson played for the Brewers? I'm like, shut up, Dad. That didn't happen.
Another name that I wrote down, drafted right after Rick Porcello at 28th, Ben Revere, another one of my personal favorite players. Love the way Ben Revere played the game.
I know you are the biggest Ben Revere fan that I know of, and I think that's something to wear proudly.
I'm glad that you said that. That really makes me happy. I'm not going to lie.
That's awesome. We got another one, Tommy Hunter, an underrated pitcher for sure. Largely Orioles, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably where I most associate him with, I'd say.
Yeah, so a little bit of background about me. The majority of my obscure baseball passion comes from MLB 2K11. Okay, so I played that on my DS.
Yes,
and also with my best friend, we on his Xbox 360, we played a lot of that all throughout high school. And so I can hear that announcer, saying Tommy Hunter, and like all those guys. So that's where those guys are locked in my brain largely.
Yeah, definitely. Tommy Hunter, he wound up having a long career. He stuck around forever.
Yeah, for sure. You got, and like a guy like that, especially a pitcher, you got to admire that.
Yes.
The amount of, how many pitches do you think he's thrown in his career? Think about it. I
don't even know, dude.
Exactly. Other big names: Freddie Freeman, Giancarlo Stanton.
Wow.
What
a draft.
Those guys were in the World Series this past year, right?
Yes.
So there's no reason that Devin Mesoraco couldn't be catching for one of those teams. It's just wild to think about.
One thing I was surprised about looking at Devin Mesoraco is, was there ever a shift to try to make him a first baseman or something? I never really saw.
At the very end, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
looks like a little bit in 2018, but other than that, he only caught. So
I've got it right here. 401 appearances as a catcher, 1 appearance as a first baseman. That's it.
Yeah, that's wild.
That's shocking to me.
Yeah.
He would have been a guy that maybe could have benefited from going over to the AL and DHing before the universal DH, I'd say.
That's a really good. I wonder how many careers could have been elongated by doing that.
He was so talented. I just don't know if his body was meant to be a catcher. Like I don't know. It just seems like I wonder if he just would have benefited from a less physically taxing position.
That's a really good point I didn't think about, because obviously he wasn't going to play first base in Cincinnati with Joey Votto.
Yep.
But according to Baseball Reference, Wilmer Flores was the first baseman for the 2018 Mets.
I mean, and he's a fine player, but I don't know. I feel like you could give somebody with the bat potential Mesoraco had a chance there.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know. Wilmer Flores didn't really. He was mainly. I remember him more as like a second baseman.
Yeah, middle infield. I remember him being in the middle infield when that clip of him crying when he thought he was traded. I believe he's at shortstop or third base when that's happening. So that's
I
associate him.
Is he okay? So he's still active. Looks like.
Yes, with Giants, I believe.
Okay, yeah. I in my head that name is a Giant to me. So.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
for sure.
And a good point you brought up, though, that I also didn't think about when I said it, is they did have Joey Votto, and then kind of around that time, too, they had Yonder Alonso, who was a big-name prospect at the time. So Mesoraco really was blocked from playing first base. So that's partly why that never happened, I'd assume.
Because even and I want to come back to Yonder Alonso in a minute, but even a guy like Johnny Bench, right? Like he played more positions than you would think, right? Like he played some first base, he played some third base, and he played some left field.
Left field, how about that?
Yeah, go look at his positions on Baseball Reference. Like he's playing different position. They have him in 1970 playing center field. You know what I mean? Like that's crazy.
I would never have guessed that Johnny Bench ever played center field. So that's perfect for anybody who plays Immaculate Grid, though. If there's ever like a Cincinnati Reds played outfield question, you can nail it with that.
That's got to be 0.000%. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Johnny Bench, he's got 195 appearances at third base. So he's played over a season's worth at third base. 111 total games in the outfield as well. Yeah. I really never knew.
And if you sometime go dig into just the Big Red Machine in general, being in Cincinnati, that was the glory days of the Reds, and then we had 1990, and then that's it, right? So everybody is still stuck in the 90s, or still stuck in the 70s. But if you go look at that team, everybody played everywhere. Like it almost looks like the Dodgers or the Padres, right? Like anybody can really play. So like you got Pete Rose. So he was an outfielder, comes to play. Then he starts playing third base. He plays a good bit of first base towards the end of his career. He's all over the place, right?
Yep.
And being the hit king, a lot of people, I just don't even think about his defense. Never. Because like it's so overshadowed. But he was a true utility player, and I think that gets overlooked.
That's really something that kind of opened my eyes, because in my mind, the super utility era, if you want to say, kind of kicks in when Ben Zobrist starts doing it in my mind. Yeah, but in actuality, it was happening way in the 70s, like you just pointed out. So that's really interesting to hear about.
Yeah, for sure. A couple more names from this draft. Jonathan Lucroy.
Yes, another great catcher.
Yeah, another. I would say majority NL Central guy, played for the Brewers for a long time. Another, and in my mind, he's more on the Tucker Barnhart kind of shelf, but still a very underrated catcher that had his years of pop for sure.
Yeah, he had one season, I believe he made a run at MVP. I believe it was a top 10 finish at one point. I mean, really impressive. Like he had made a couple All-Star teams, pretty good with the glove. Lucroy, I mean, he was a really talented player.
2014. Same year Mesoraco really hit it off. He came in fourth in the MVP.
Yes. I thought it was top 5. I said top 10 just to be safe. But yeah, really great year for him. I believe he made multiple All-Star teams as well, didn't he?
2. Yep.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my fading memory of him, I believe he was on the 2020 Red Sox, I think. Kind of a mess of a team.
Yes,
yeah.
He played one game.
One game. I think I remember the actual signing more than him playing.
Yeah,
that's kind of the fading memory I have of Jonathan Lucroy, sadly.
Yeah, well, because he's with Milwaukee from 2010 to 2016,
and he bounces around.
Yeah, dude. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize how much. I remember like he would just pop up in the most random place, and I'm like, oh, that's where he is, and and again, kind of that's what Tucker Barnhart's done, in the last couple of years. But yeah, man, he's all with Milwaukee, like doing pretty solid, and then he goes Texas, Colorado, Oakland, Angels, Cubs, Boston, Nationals, Braves. Like that's so much moving around. And
Jonathan Lucroy on the Braves, I had no idea about until you just said that. Like, and I've looked at his baseball reference. Like,
he was worth 0.1 more. So
in 2 games, he was doing something right. So looking back to Devin Mesoraco, he gets his first start in the MLB in 2011. He plays 18 games. It's not really a great start, but really small sample size. So, I mean, you can't really factor that in too much,
Sure.
And so for me, and maybe you can speak on this more as you are a fan of them, I'm kind of looking at it from the outside in. This kind of feels to me almost like the glory days of the Reds, even though they didn't win. You got Brandon Phillips, you got Joey Votto, a young Cueto, Volquez, Bronson Arroyo, a young Chapman. Like that seems like a really good team on paper to me.
They were, for sure. Yeah, man. I mean, this was the team that I grew up with, and I still remember. I'm pretty sure it was 2013 when they lost to the Giants in whatever round it was in the playoffs, and I remember sitting in my living room listening to it on the radio station because the Reds blacked out, as I think a lot of major league teams did. They blacked out their local games, and so here in Cincinnati, the only games I could watch were Cubs and White Sox sometimes from a Chicago station.
WGN?
Yeah, and then the occasional Yankees game, right? So because we didn't have satellite or like DirecTV or like that, we just had the antenna that gets the local channels, and the Reds weren't on it, right?
That's
so like
insane.
that was like, I'm not gonna lie, that kind of hurt as a young player because I wanted to watch the Reds. Like I wanted to get to watch the players. And I'm very thankful that my dad introduced me to listening to it because I have a lot of fond memories of listening to Marty Brenneman calling the Reds games. So that was disappointing, but I still remember I was sitting on the floor in my living room as the Giants took them down, and I was like, man, I don't know if they're going to be back here, and they never really were.
Yeah.
So
we'll get into the 2013 season, but Devin Mesoraco as a player only one postseason at bat, and it came in that 2013 wild card game against the Pirates. That's it as far as postseason play for him goes, which is sad because they had a lot of talented players in Cincinnati.
Yeah, 100%. I'm trying to pull that up right now just so I get that, because the other thing about the Reds is that there's just so many random guys you completely forget about.
Yes.
So like you said, okay, Yonder Alonso. Okay, nobody remembers him as a Red. The Reds at one point had Matt Kemp, they had Josh Hamilton, they had Asdrubal Cabrera, Freddie Galvis, Jose. Okay, so like a lot of really random guys, and then I'll be like, oh no, I know that team, and then I look back and I'm like, who are these guys?
Yeah.
Like I remember them, but I was like, I don't remember that guy playing, right? Yep. So like Xavier Paul, like I hardly remember him, and he had he played in 97 games.
Do you remember Derek Robinson's one MLB season? I've posted about that before.
I was just about to bring him up because when you would play with the Reds in a game from that given year, Derek Robinson would be on the team, and he was faster than Chris Heisey.
Really?
So I would always put Derek Robinson. I was obsessed with fast guys because I wanted to steal bases in whatever game it was.
Oh, you loved Billy Hamilton, I bet.
Well, I did, but he just let me down so many times. But yeah, I would always swap out Chris Heisey, and no hate to Chris Heisey, man. I mean,
Yes.
he's a Cincinnati legend,
Of course.
that a lot of people forget about. But yeah, I would always put Derek Robinson in and then make it bat leadoff because he was fast. So Derek Robinson did get love from like fourth grade me. So like no
Good,
worries.
good. Very strange career for him. He played quite a bit in that rookie season, then never played again in the MLB. Something that everybody listening should definitely look up. Like really a strange career.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and they have, and the guys on their bench, you know, they have a lot of, I don't know. I don't want to say no names because that sounds, that's too mean, but a lot of guys who just kind of faded. Except my guy Ryan Ludwig, another forgotten about guy who played a major role in some of those really good Reds teams that I don't think he gets enough credit for sure.
If we're naming obscure Reds, which Ludwig I would dare say isn't really obscure, but if we're going down that road, a name I have to name is Paul Janisch, one of my favorite players ever. I loved Paul Janisch.
Yeah, so Paul Janisch was another, again, no hate to Paul Janisch, but again, swag was not, and he was at a disadvantage because he was playing next to Brandon Phillips, right?
Yes,
like,
tough.
That man oozed swag, okay?
Yes.
Like, I had another account reach out to me a while ago and asked me who my favorite player was growing up, and I was trying to think about it. And I was like, who did I try to like pretend I was in the backyard with my buddies more than anybody? And it was Brandon Phillips.
Definitely behind the back flips, the double play.
Between the legs, like, 100%. And the problem was, like, I didn't play second base, so I knew I was never going to be Brandon Phillips, but like, he was so cool.
Yeah, he really was. Zach Cozart kind of held his own, I would argue, for a minute there, especially that one season he had.
Yeah, no doubt. And yeah, I got to give my props to Zach Cozart because he took a lot of flack for a lot of years because he never put up big numbers up until kind of the end of his career when 2017.
Yes,
when he was
amazing season,
one of the best players on the Reds. I mean, a solid 5 WAR season from him there, but he struggled for a couple years, being at kind of average or slightly below, and he hung in there. And then, I think he got his flowers in 2017. So I got to give mad props to Zach Cozart, him and his donkey that Joey Votto got him, and for hanging in there and still being able to have a really awesome season to look back on.
Yes, definitely. I love Zach Cozart. And so we continue on to Devin Mesoraco's career. We look at 2012. He's got a bit of an expanded role, but he gets off to a slow start in his career, really, which probably had him feeling the pressure, I'd have to guess, as such a highly touted prospect. Going into 2012, he's the number 1 prospect in the Reds farm system. A lot of places have him ranked top 20 in MLB as well. So there's a lot of pressure on his shoulders going into that season, I'd say.
Yeah. No doubt. And people were just hungry. The team was building and they were ready for another bat to join the lineup. And any time you have a decent catcher in Cincinnati, it's you draw the bench card every single time. And it's kind of like I'm a big Packers fan, for example, right? And so as soon as anybody comes up, especially Jordan Love, it's like, oh, is he Brett Favre? Is he Aaron Rodgers? Is he that? And so when you're trying to fill the shoes of that all-time great, like, that's got to be intimidating. But I would definitely be intimidated. I don't know if Devin Mesoraco was or not, but I definitely would be.
Yep, I'd say so too. But one thing I do want to point out is every year he starts to get a little bit better. Like, I'll look at his OPS, as you guys can see on the screen. In 2011, 586. 2012, it jumps up to 640, and then 2013 we have 649. So the more reps he is improving quite a bit. And the Reds do start him off with a small role. It's got to be hard to make an impact when you're barely playing. I mean, that first season, 18 games and then 54 games. That's not a lot to really make an impact on.
Well, and he was looked at as the offensive catcher, right? Because we already had Ryan Hannigan, who was the solid defensive guy. So he was looked at as the offensive guy, and there was definitely people were expecting a lot from him.
Yeah, definitely. 2013 is where I'd really say he starts to find his footing. For the first time ever, he posts a positive B-WAR, plays in 103 games, 9 homers, 42 RBIs. I mean, it's really a decent season for an up-and-coming catcher. What's sad about it, though, and I'll get you to comment on it, this is the first time he plays 100 games in a season at 103, but it's only the second time that will ever happen in his career, which is it really just hurts to look at.
Yeah. For sure, and we're going to get into why that is very, very shortly, unfortunately. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, hey, 100 games behind the dish, man. That's still a lot of innings. And he did so in this after this 2013 season. He mentions he learned a lot from Ryan Hanigan while he was there. Which, if I had to pick a guy to learn a lot from, I mean, Ryan Hanigan. He was there and he caught a lot of innings, and the man had to know his stuff. So.
Definitely.
He had to be a good resource to learn from. And then also another Cincinnati Reds legend, Corky Miller.
People love Corky Miller, man.
Man, his baseball reference is nothing to really – it's not that interesting, but and I don't even know if Cincinnati fans understand the impact that he had developing younger players, right? So and I did see him play one game.
Really?
And they called out veteran catcher Corky Miller, and now my dad and I, every time he gets brought up, we always refer to him as veteran catcher Corky Miller because that's how he was referred to by the announcer. But he floated around in the minor leagues, really just developing guys. And I think if you asked Devin Mesoraco, I don't know this for sure, but if you asked him, I'm sure he would have to mention Corky Miller as being helpful. And another name he mentions is Don Long, the batting coach. I watched another interview. I believe it was the Prospect Live guys. I want to give them their credit. Yeah, he says preparation, like leading up to that season, he didn't really do anything that much different. But like what you were saying, I think he was just really starting to come into his own and find himself.
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that as his role expands, his play gets better. Yeah, I really think that's what I point to. You mentioned Ryan Hanigan. I got to throw out there, I always will have a resentment for Ryan Hanigan because when the Red Sox traded for him, they traded away Will Middlebrooks, who was one of my favorite Red Sox players ever. Yeah. So I will always, give the cold shoulder to Ryan Hanigan, even though he doesn't deserve it. I'm sure he's a great guy, but I am a little bit bitter about Ryan Hanigan. I can't lie to you.
Yeah, because, I mean, Middlebrooks was supposed to be your new guy.
Yes, after Youkilis, he was supposed to be the – and then that sets off – Middlebrooks was great, talented. He had some injury problems too. But him, kind of getting traded away sets up the eventual Pablo Sandoval Boston run. Because we can't find a third baseman consistently, so then we pivot to that, and we all know how that went. So wasn't great, but we have Devers now, which he doesn't play great defense, but he's a 30 home run, 100 RBI guy, so it's hard to complain.
Pretty consistently too. So.
Yes, definitely. And so now we get to the moment we've all been waiting for. And that is Devin Mesoraco's 2014. There are a ton of people online who absolutely love this season. They bring it up almost daily when I talk to people about baseball. How fondly do you remember Devin Mesoraco's 2014?
It was just like, I remember going to baseball practice and like those were the glory days when kids didn't have phones really yet. So like you heard everything from your dad. And so we would be in the dugout. And one of my buddies would be like, hey, did you hear what Devin Mesoraco did? I'd be like, no, what? He's like, bro, he hit another home run. Like, he's all-star bound for sure. Like, the buzz was really cool. And I think it's a different buzz nowadays because everybody sees it. But, it was cool for sure.
Definitely. That's really cool to see the inside life of a Reds fan at that time, to really get kind of first person experience as to how it went, because it really is, it almost feels like an iconic season, especially online with how people treat it, because it really is a great season from a catcher especially. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, he was not only did he have a good season, he was one of the best catchers in the league at the time. Like, we're not just talking about, he had a good season. Like, him and Posey and Lucroy were like the guys that year. Without a doubt. I mean, I'll read off his stats real quick. Like we said, he made the All-Star team, 4.9 WAR in just 114 games, 25
Yes.
homers, 80 RBIs, 273 batting average, 893 OPS, and a 147 OPS plus. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if you're a batting average guy, an OPS guy, a WAR guy. Like, he really just did it all that season. No matter, like, pick your stat, he was good at
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. He's got a little bit of something for everybody. Now, before we go further in the 2014 season, the injuries have already started.
Yes,
Okay.
that was my next point. Very good. Yep.
Now,
This is where it gets a little rough.
but before we're in 2014, I want to take you all the way back to high school for a minute. Devin Mesoraco had Tommy John surgery in high school. And a lot of people don't know that. I did not know that until I did research for this episode. But so the injuries, it didn't just start here. Okay. So he's already gone through a really extensive rehab process with Tommy John as a catcher, right?
Yes.
So he mentioned that he did do some pitching. But also that gives props to his bat, because he was still getting scouted for his bat. Because he could still swing even though he wasn't throwing. Okay, so keep that one in the back pocket. And I believe it's to start the season. In 2014, he has a left oblique strain.
Yes.
And that's March 30th. And then let's see, he gets activated in April, and then placed back on the disabled list on April 26th, at the end of April, for straining his left hamstring. Yep. And then looks like he's finally activated again in May.
Yeah, this was a point I had written down. Thank you for covering the specifics on those injuries. That's right. There's 2 injured list stints even before the All-Star break in 2014. Yeah. So he did all that in spite of the injuries, but sadly, as we'll see once we get into it eventually, it's kind of a sign of things to come in the future, which I hate to say, but it really is. It's where you start to see the injuries happen. But that Tommy John point, that's something I didn't know about until last week myself either. Like, it's not, that information is not really easy to find, which you think it would be, especially around the time of the draft. Like, he got selected 15th overall, even though he had Tommy John. I mean, really impressive. It really shows how much people believed in his bat, like you said.
Yeah, for sure. And I also find it a little bit interesting. So not only having Tommy John as a catcher, which is a little bit odd. I mean, I guess if you think about it, it's maybe the second most like strained arm position on the field. But also that's really common now. But back then, I mean, what would that have been? Probably late 2010s, I would imagine. I don't know the year exactly. But Tommy John was not as common then, especially for position players. So it also makes me wonder what his rehab process was like, because now I feel like they have it down to a science, how you come back. And take that with a grain of salt, because everybody's different. But it does make me wonder how thorough his rehab might have been compared to what we have today.
Yeah, definitely being in high school, and then like you said, it wasn't as common back then, especially for a position player. That's a really good point. I wonder if it wasn't quite up to par with what a rehab would be like these days. It definitely couldn't have been.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't seem to bother him too much throughout the rest of his career, but still something to think about for sure.
Definitely. And so in 2013, he plays 103 games, 2014, 114. For the rest of his career, he never plays more than 84 in a season. I mean, it's just injury year after year. And we'll start in 2015. He only plays in 23 games, it looks like. Yeah. I mean, that's really just rough. But in January of 2015, before we get into that, he does get paid. He gets some generational wealth, as I like to call it. 4 years, $28 million. And I feel like at the time, I don't know how the Reds fan base felt, that had to seem like a good deal, because the injuries weren't as much of a concern at that point, and he had just put up that amazing season.
Yeah, I can't remember any specifics about that as a kid, because I was way more worried about what flavor of Big League Chew my mom was going to get me than how much big leaguers were getting paid. But I don't know. I mean, I do know Cincinnati was pretty high on Devin Mesoraco, so I don't think there was a lot of criticism towards getting him paid. But anytime you pay one player, a decent amount of money, you take that risk that he does get hurt. And that makes me really concerned for guys like Juan Soto and the Mets. Well, I'm not concerned for Juan Soto, but I'm concerned for the Mets going forward, doing something like that. So, but yeah, I mean, props to him. He got his flowers. Like he earned it. So you can't take that away from him, even though the rest of his career was a little iffy.
Yeah, it was definitely awesome to see him cash in on that great season. I love it to see these guys get paid, especially when you know how hard they work. I mean, he really put in the work and it showed. And so I am happy that he did get paid for it. It also seems like for his hitting potential, it's not even potential at this point. He showed how great he can hit. It almost feels like a steal. I mean, it was 10 years ago. This isn't 30 years ago. I mean,
That's
4
true.
years, 28 million. What's 7 million a year, I'd assume. I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of a great deal for both sides, I think.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, because it's also not too long either.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's just long enough I think they were hoping to capture his prime, right? Because he's in his later 20s, which so 2014 he's 26, which seems old, but you see a lot of these guys hit their stride in their late 20s. So I think they were hoping to capture that prime, and then if it was truly Cincinnati, they would trade him away as soon as he's good and people start to really like him. But, that's beside the point.
Yeah, what this deal screamed out to me based on his service time at the time, it looks like they kind of tried to buy out his arbitration years, which we do see happen quite often. We've seen the Braves do it plenty. So what that tells me is they predicted him in the future to be worth more than $7 million a year because they wanted to try and get him on the cheap end so they wouldn't have to pay him as much later in arbitration.
Well,
so, I mean,
go ahead.
That really just shows me what they saw in him at the time.
Sure. Another perspective I want to bring up, a Cincinnati perspective particularly, is they've been known between Reds and Bengals to pick their guy and, in my opinion, overshoot their potential. So like a guy with Joey Votto, like they locked him down for a long time.
Great choice.
He really started to dwindle towards the end, but they picked him, locked him down, and paid him his money. A guy like, Joe Burrow, they paid him a crap ton of money. And there was a lot of Cincinnati fans are very back and forth. They'll turn on you quick if you're not careful. But when Burrow was dealing with those injuries, like there was a lot of criticism because they thought we paid him too much. So I don't know. Cincinnati contracts they're just interesting to me.
Yeah, to build off that point, I feel like having a Cincinnati Reds themed episode, and it would be wrong if we didn't mention him. What are your thoughts on Jay Bruce? Because I believe they handed him a decent contract at one point, and he had a great career, especially with the Reds. But I do hear people say they thought he was going to be even better. Do you kind of share that opinion as well? What do you think?
My thing with Jay Bruce, well, first of all, one thing about Jay Bruce, one time I went to a game and they handed out wiffle ball bats that were
I've heard of these.
Yes, his spec. So God, I don't know, they were like 34 inches and then, hollow. That was the most amazing wiffle ball bat I ever owned. And I swung that thing to no end. Like it just absolutely bombed. And so that definitely thumbs up for that. That definitely improved my perception of Jay Bruce because of the epic wiffle ball bat that I had.
That seriously almost makes me want to go on eBay and try and score one right now.
Dude.
I gotta see if there's any that exist out there. So it was to his dimensions of his bat.
Yes, it was massive. So when you look on the ground and you have the skinny wiffle ball, the skinny yellow one, or the Jay Bruce one, no, dude,
yes.
I'm gonna take that because the fat part is this long, and that thing just launched a tennis ball.
I'm searching it up right now on eBay. I can't find any of it.
Oh, dude,
that's really sad.
We'll have, if we ever collab, we'll have to do a video on it, and
definitely
compare it to modern day ones.
Yeah, that's really sad. I was hoping to maybe pick up one if they were cheap enough. I couldn't find any on eBay.
I'll have to check my parents' garage and see if it's still in there. But back to Jay Bruce. So I don't know, man. As a kid and still trying to learn how to judge players, average was something I always looked at because that's what we're at the beginning of the analytics side of things, right?
Yes.
So Jay Bruce always had a lower average, and I did not appreciate what he did, the role that he filled. right? Because he struck out a lot, had a kind of a lower average, and so I did not appreciate him as a player as much as I should have. But you're talking about a guy who hit over 300 home runs in his career. Like, that's nothing to shake a stick at. And he had an OPS over 100, I would say the majority of his career. So I don't know. He's, like I said, struck out a lot. So when he hit home runs, Cincinnati loved him. When he struck out too much and slumped, they hated him. And it just back and forth.
Yeah, he's one of those guys I've just heard people kind of have a love-hate relationship with. Yes. So I really wanted to get your take on him.
But I mean, he hit over 30 home runs multiple years, and he was a 30 home run, 90 RBI guy, and he was relatively consistent.
Definitely, so, I'd agree with that without a doubt.
Above, I'll say this: he was above average.
Yes,
pretty much his whole career. I mean, a career OPS of 781 over 14 years.
That's quite good, without a doubt.
So I want to take this opportunity right now to give some props to Jay Bruce.
Yes, everybody, please, if you have kids, tell your kids about Jay Bruce, please. Don't let his name fade into obscurity yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we go back to Devin Mesoraco, and I feel like I went on this Jay Bruce train to kind of avoid it because it does get a little rough here. I mean, 2015, looks like in June he has hip surgery, I believe.
Yeah.
That can never be good for a catcher.
So like you said, in January he signs that big contract, and then in June he undergoes left hip surgery, and he misses the rest of the season. He has to have reconstructive hip surgery.
It's almost amazing that he even came back from that. I could totally see that being a career-ending injury, especially for a catcher at the time.
Especially for a catcher, and like you said earlier in the episode, there was no effort, or you could argue no opportunity to switch positions, and he went back to catcher with a hip injury, and that fact gets crazier here in a few minutes.
I would definitely like this rephrase it how I said at the beginning. Like I said, I did say why didn't they try it, and I kind of questioned that, but obviously, like I said, I think Alonso might be gone at this point, but there's still Joey Votto, and there's still about 9 years left of Joey Votto too. Like, he's not going anywhere at this point.
Yeah. So, speaking of first baseman though, real quick, we completely overshadowed something in 2014. We got to run back to real quick. So one thing I remember about Devin Mesoraco is grand slams. Okay, he hit 3 of them in 2014, which ties the Reds' single season grand slam record with a few other guys.
Really?
But it hadn't happened since Chris Sabo in the 90s. And this is I'm digging deep for the weirdest fact ever. But I think you'll appreciate this. One of those home runs, or one of those grand slams, I'm sorry, he hits off of Bronson Arroyo when they played the Diamondbacks. And in that game, playing first base was Roger Bernardina. And that was the only game he ever played first base, was the game that Devin Mesoraco hits a grand slam off of former Red Bronson Arroyo.
Like Roger Bernardino, like Nationals outfielder, they had him at first base at one point?
Yes.
I never knew he played first base at all. That's insane.
He didn't. That was the only game. Like, I looked up the clip just for this episode, and I was like, that's not Joey Votto. And I was like, oh, that's Roger Bernardino? Okay.
There's no way he even had a first baseman. He had to go borrow one or pick it up from Dick's Sporting Goods right before the game.
on the way to the field.
Get a clubhouse attendant to break it in or something.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
No, that's really crazy. Thank you for that. I'm really glad I know that Roger Bernardino played one game at first base. Like, sincerely, I'm happy about that. So as far as numbers go for 2015, I mean, there's not a lot to it. 23 games, but only 45 at bats. 0 home runs for the first time in his career. 178 batting average and a 519 OPS. I mean, I will give him the benefit of the doubt. Small sample size. He just wasn't right that whole season. I mean, the hip injury. I mean, who knows how long that pain was lingering before the surgery even happened. I mean, just a lost season from him, I'd say.
Yeah, that is a good point. And It does make me wonder what his numbers look like in the last few games of 2014. Like I wonder when that injury started.
I don't know, and that's probably something only he really knows deep down. It's like, when did he alert somebody? Did he try and play through it? I mean, I feel like those are interesting questions to have, really.
So this is another interesting, really weird fact. But there's one game. You have to forgive me. I don't remember exactly which season it is, but it's before this when he just comes up and he gets a concussion, and he gets ejected from the game because he said this in an
bumped the ref.
Yeah,
umpire, excuse me,
on purpose, because he wanted to get thrown out because he didn't feel good, and if he took himself out of the game voluntarily, he said Scott Rowland would have given him crap for it.
Yeah,
and so he intentionally gets thrown out, and then later that evening, they put him on the DL for a concussion.
Yeah, that's old man Scott Rowland too, I believe. At that point, you don't really want to mess with that. Yeah,
I heard another story about Scott Rowland that, like, towards the end of his career, the young guys would pick up the balls off the ground and load the tee for him because his body was so broken that, like, it was everything he could do to just get ready to take the field.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, Devin Mesoraco for that little altercation with the umpire. He got a 3-game suspension, appealed it, got moved down to 2. But like you discussed, I mean, he was taken out of action with a concussion anyway. So, you know.
That's so funny.
I didn't know that he's gone on the record to say it was intentional, though.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't do that until, 8 months ago in an interview with one of the Prospects Live guys. But, like, that is just one of those things. Like, that kind of little stuff probably happens way more than we realize. But, like, why would he admit that, until it's years down the road? So,
yeah,
it's something crazy because he didn't want to get made fun of. And I don't know. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing that he wanted to, try to avoid that, and that somebody was willing to ride him. But that might be a little bit of an extreme measure.
Yeah, tough almost to a fault, it seems like. I feel like that would never happen today. Like, I feel like people are much more sympathetic to concussions, I believe. Like, and we're much more aware of it, especially for catchers. I believe Posey. Posey and Maurer, didn't they have some? I believe they had concussion issues as well. At least one of them did, and that kind of led to the end of them, hanging it up a bit early, possibly as well. So concussions can be a real issue for catchers.
Yeah.
So we look at 2016, man. I mean, only 16 games that season as well. More injury issues for him right there. Looks like shoulder surgery for a torn labrum, if I'm reading that correctly.
Yeah. So he has to have reconstructive shoulder surgery.
That's a tough one.
Shoulder surgery. Yeah.
Shoulder surgery. There you go.
Yeah. And then his other hip in 2016 as well. So, like, I mean, so now he's down a shoulder. I don't know which shoulder it was. Either way, very important for a catcher. You got to be able to throw and catch. But yeah, two serious injuries in the same year, and that knocked him out for even more games than the year previous.
Yeah, and I mean, we're kind of turning here quickly. I mean, he simply just didn't play a ton. But we look at 2017. I mean, he runs into some more bad luck. He recovers, from the surgery. But it looks like in August of 2017, this injury isn't even no way his fault. Not that the other ones were, but I mean, he gets hit by a pitch by Jose Quintana. I mean, and that's the rest of his season right there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he said he might have also still been rehabbing his shoulder. And then the foot happens. And it's just like, I mean, I could only imagine how low, what a low point he must have been at mentally. And it's just got to be so defeating to constantly get knocked down like that. And especially, I mean, think about the responsibility that he probably felt, with his contract and all that. And but there was nothing he could do about it. I mean, it was hardly performance related and to an extent, just luck, I guess.
Yeah, terrible luck. And so what I want to point out, and this might make you and other Reds fans a little sad. So he plays 114 games in 2014, right? Makes the All-Star team, signs that big deal. The next 3 seasons, plays a combined 95 games. That's it for those next 3 seasons.
That's
terrible luck.
Crazy.
I mean, Yep. So from 2015 to 2017, only 95 games. And then, I mean, we go to 2018, and then that's pretty much it for him after that.
Yeah, pretty much. And it looks like, and it was bittersweet because coming behind him, we get Tucker Barnhart, who was a defensive first guy. So, I mean, it was kind of like you've got Ryan Hannigan, your defensive guy, and Mesoraco, your offensive guy. And then Hannigan drops out, and then Barnhart comes in to fill that role. And then later, Mesoraco drops out, and then Stevenson comes to fill that role. And then Barnhart is gone. And then now we have Trevino coming to fill that role. So
Yes.
it's kind of an interesting, like, defense first, defense first, offense guy.
How do you feel about Stevenson, by the way, if we can take a minute? I see a lot of love for him around.
I like him. The kid, he's such a, oh, he's not a kid. I mean, he's probably
He's older than we are.
But he's just such a freak athlete. I mean, he's huge, and he just hits the ball so hard. I love the guy, and I know Cincinnati loves him. He has so much potential. He is one of those guys where, like, you'll hear the fantasy analysts talk about, like, how hard he hits the ball, but how frequent can be a little here and there. So I would love to see him put some more barrels on balls, as he comes up. And I know I did hear Mesoraco have some pretty high praise for him. And I'm really excited for what Trevino brings, because I didn't appreciate that trade until doing this research, because I wasn't grasping the value of having both in the clubhouse. And so I'm looking for Stevenson to really be able to learn a lot from Trevino. And I don't know. I hope that's mutually beneficial. Another thing real quick to mention about catching platoons is splitting pitchers. And we'll get to that here in 2018 because it gets interesting. But he said that, let me find it in my notes here. Hannigan was mainly catching Bronson Arroyo, Johnny Cueto, and Matt Latos. And then Mesoraco was more of a Homer Bailey, Mike Leake guy. And in 2012, sorry to jump all the way back to 2012, but
no, go ahead. You're cooking right now.
Those five guys did not miss a start until the playoffs, which is absolutely unreal. I didn't even believe that until I heard it, and I still don't really believe it.
I don't know if I do either.
But that's what he said in an interview. So I'll just put that. I'll say allegedly. How about that? But that was a legendary rotation. But he said he really liked doing things that way because there wasn't really mystery as to, like, you're not trying to build a relationship with all five guys. You've got your guys, and it gives you the opportunity to get to know them really well. So just something else to keep in mind. But this gets really interesting here in 2018.
Yeah, it does. And so 2018, it's kind of bittersweet because he's going to get a new opportunity, I guess you could say. But he has to leave the franchise that he's known for so long, doesn't he?
He does, yep.
Yeah, and so he's going to play 18 games with the Reds in 2018. It's a little underwhelming. He goes 9 for 45, 220 batting average, 630 OPS, not fantastic. But then a trade occurs. And this is a really interesting trade, too, actually. With a name, I obviously remember this name, but I had no idea he was involved in this trade at all. Did you?
I did. I remember it briefly. And at the time, I was pretty excited. It was weird because, like, personally, guys who have trouble off the field, it's iffy for me because, like, I like players that have good character, and Matt Harvey was a little on the fritz at the time, and Devin Mesoraco, he had just been injured for 3 years. So at the time, I was like, okay, we're getting rid of Mesoraco. It sucks to see him go, but he also wasn't really providing a whole lot of he wasn't producing much. I'll say that. I don't want to say he wasn't providing much, but he wasn't producing. And then we get Matt Harvey, who had some trouble, but so much potential. And so I was like, you know what? I mean, this could really become something.
Yes. Yeah. Harvey, certainly at the time a change of scenery candidate. I know they love to say that in baseball.
Good
I could
point.
definitely see the belief where change of scenery candidate for both players, actually, I would have to say. So
Yeah.
this was a mutual swap of two veterans, with each team probably thinking, maybe I can fix Matt Harvey. Maybe I can fix
Yeah.
Devin Mesoraco, get him healthy. I have to
Yeah.
think that was their mindsets when they made this trade.
Yeah. That's a good point. Just trying to, I want to say at the time the Mets catcher had gone down. It might have been, was it Darno at the time?
2018. It could have been.
I'm getting Kevin. All right, I might be chasing something that's not there, so disregard that. Well,
Kevin Plawecki. Let's see.
I don't know. I mean, Travis Darno is on the team, but he only played 4 games, so I don't know. That might be chasing something that's not there, but still, I think
their primary catcher listed on Baseball Reference is Kevin Plawecki with 79 games caught.
I do see that.
Then I've got Devin Mesoraco at 66. Thomas Nido, 34 games caught. Kind of a mixed bag at the catching position for them, really.
Well, yeah, because Plawecki. Okay, maybe it was Plawecki. I don't know. I mean, because 79. Plawecki only plays 79 games, and Mesoraco ends up playing 66.
Yeah, he comes. They acquire him in May, and he's one of their primary catchers. Mesoraco gets a pretty good amount of run with the Mets there.
Yeah, definitely. So now this is fascinating because there's if you don't mind me taking the lead on the trade here.
Go for it.
Okay, so this is fascinating because 2 other big names on the Mets at the time are Jay Bruce and Todd Frazier.
How about that?
So and he did say specifically that the Mets, there were rumblings, I guess. He said nobody talked to him specifically, but there were rumblings, and the Mets talked to Jay Bruce and Todd Frazier, and they're like, "What's this guy like?" And they're like, "No, we like him." Like, all right, like let's bring him on. And so I don't know. I'm not super versed in the world of contracts, so I don't know how much they were paying Harvey at the time and if they were trying to offload it, but still very, very interesting. So he gets traded mid-series. He takes batting practice with the Reds and then goes and sits in the dugout still wearing his Cincinnati Reds socks, and then he pinch hits later that game.
Yeah.
So just really, really strange.
Yeah, definitely a roller coaster there. I'm sure that, they had to be quite emotional for him, I'd have to assume.
Yeah.
He spent 8 seasons with the Reds. That's a long time.
It is. But at the same time, the Reds were absolutely garbage at that time. They were 8-27.
Ouch.
Which was, if I'm not mistaken, that matches the worst 35-game start in franchise history. And the Mets were doing considerably better at the time. Yeah. So he wasn't bittersweet is a good way to describe it, because that was the team that had invested so much into him, but they were also like dog water at the time. So I'm sure he appreciated going to a more competitive team.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point too, because these players do want to win. I truly believe most MLB players care about winning a World Series in my mind.
Yeah, for sure. It does make me concerned that some guys, I don't know, it's hard to say, but it makes me concerned that some guys maybe don't care as much as long as they get paid. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side of that, I'm sure Mike Trout is just heartbroken that he's never going to get his World Series, and he's just gonna languish with the Angels for the rest of his life. Yeah,
he'll probably go home and cry in a hot tub filled up with $100 bills. Ease the pain a little bit. So Mesoraco's career ends in a dramatic fashion. But before we get to that, I want to say this Mets tenure is honestly pretty good. Not to use the name of the show, but it is pretty good.
It's pretty good.
66 games, he pops 10 homers, drives in 30, OPS above 700, 715. 98 OPS plus. He's, about a league average hitter, which doesn't sound like a ton, but for a guy who had such trouble staying on the field and producing for those 3 seasons prior, this is a really nice look for him.
Yeah, I don't know. It's he came in there and did a fine job. So You can't really argue with that. What these stats don't reflect, though, is the impact that he had with the pitching rotation.
Great point.
So this is a pitching rotation of let me pull it up so I don't miss anybody. But
this glorious Mets rotation.
Yeah, Jacob deGrom, I believe long hair Jacob deGrom, long hair Noah Syndergaard, Steven Matz, and Zach Wheeler. And I completely forgot Zach Wheeler started with the Mets. Because he's just such a Philly now in my mind. But this was big, and he said when he came over that they really kind of gave him free reign of the pitching staff and let him run those meetings. And really just and talk to the bullpen and just handle that. And that's something that he thoroughly enjoyed throughout his whole career. He enjoyed calling games. He enjoyed the strategy of it. And so that, especially with catchers, I think sometimes they provide so much value that nobody ever sees. In a way, they're the offensive linemen of the baseball field, right? Like without them, nothing happens. But sometimes it goes unnoticed, and especially in the days of, now we have pitch comp, right? Like you can't even be certain what percentage of catchers are actually calling the game versus somebody, in the dugout calling it and relaying it to them who has to relay it to the pitcher. Or sometimes we even have pitchers calling their own pitches to their catcher. But Mesoraco was a strategy-minded guy. He liked calling games, and he did a great job of it. And in fact, by the third game that he catches Jacob deGrom, he goes into the office and says, "Hey, this is my guy for the rest of the year."
That speaks volumes.
And I believe we're talking about Cy Young Jacob deGrom, 2018.
I believe so. I'll fact check that, but I think you're right. Let me see.
I should know that.
2018 Cy Young, 5th place in MVP All-Star. Like, he was that guy in 2018.
Exactly. So you got to wonder how much of that – you can't give too much credit to Mesoraco because he is the catcher. He's not the guy that won the Cy Young, but at the same time, how much of a role did he play in that? I mean, he's coming off of catching some really great guys. He's coming off of catching guys like Johnny Cueto and Bronson Arroyo threw a lot of innings.
Yes.
I think at that time Luis Castillo was also kind of starting to come up as well with the Reds.
I think you might be right.
Let me double check that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And he's up there now. So he's obviously seen some really good pitchers come through there, and he played a major role in these pitchers that have gone on to still continue to produce.
Definitely. I'm a type of guy who definitely believes that a good defensive catcher does have quite a few positive impacts on your starting rotation. And another thing you touched on, Zach Wheeler on the Mets, it does feel so strange to say, but I really do only associate him as a Philly now. I mean, which is crazy. I want to say, I could be incorrect here, which would be embarrassing. I believe he started out with the Giants and was in the Carlos Beltran trade, which is how the Mets got him, if I do remember that correctly.
If it happened, unless it happened in the minors, I don't know. The first thing I'm getting on Baseball Reference is 2013 with the Mets, but he's 23 at the time.
Yeah, I believe he was a Giants prospect, and I think when the Mets acquired him, he was hurt for quite a bit too, and so that it just took him a while to get to the MLB. Let's see here. I've got drafted by the San Francisco Giants in the first round of the 2009 draft. Yeah, I feel like I remember. I gotta check and make sure he's part of that Beltran trade. That's gonna bother me forever. Let's see. Yes, traded by the San Francisco Giants to the New York Mets for Carlos Beltran and cash in July of 2011.
Way to go, Bryce.
Yeah, that felt good. I would have been upset if I was wrong because I was so sure about it when I was just sitting here saying it. But yeah, definitely interesting about him. He's been so good for so long. I almost feel he's still a bit underrated, if that's okay to say. Like, he doesn't get quite the attention I see some people get.
Well, I mean, he doesn't. He's kind of an innings eater, which is I respect that more now than ever because the guys are just throwing less and less innings. But he threw 200 innings last year, and there were only a handful of guys that did that.
Yes.
He throws. In 2021, he throws 213 innings and leads the league in strikeouts.
Wow.
So, and he also led the league in batters faced, but when you're able to hang in there and throw a lot of innings, he threw 3 complete games and 2 shutouts, which is
wow.
I mean, it's crazy that's unheard. That's almost unheard of now. But when that was like best practice, in the 80s, like that was just expected. Like if you only threw 3 complete, if you looked at Nolan Ryan and you were like, he threw 3 complete games, you'd be like,
he must be hurt.
Yeah. What happened? That's so funny.
And so we come to the point of the episode here where we're at the end of Devin Mesoraco's career. Do you kind of want to take point and talk about how his career ends? Because it's quite bizarre. I don't know if I know of another scenario quite like this.
Yeah, from my knowledge, he kind of goes to spring. I want to say he goes to spring training and then just doesn't report to his assignment.
Yes, exactly. So he doesn't make the opening day roster. So they assign him to a minor league camp, and he's pretty much just like, no, I'm not going to go.
Yeah, it's easy to look at that and think it's selfish, but I think like we said, it was just self-awareness. He got to the point, and he even said he just didn't enjoy the physical aspect anymore, and you can't really blame him, after everything he's gone through. He said he loved the game, he loved the strategy, loved calling it, but he couldn't produce physically anymore, and if he couldn't produce, he didn't want to be there. And I don't really blame him. Nobody wants to suck, right? And I think he just realized that's kind of where he was in his career, and he was like, you know what, I'm gonna hang it up and spend time with my family, and I gotta respect that.
Yeah, definitely a noble choice and an understandable one too, because hanging on and keeping your body in shape for the major league roster is one thing, but having to go through the grind of a AA or AAA season is a completely different sport almost. It's so much harder to live life in the minor leagues. So I could totally see him just not wanting to go through that whole ordeal.
Yeah, no doubt.
And so that puts a cap on the end of Devin Mesoraco's career. I'll hit you with some career stats real quick. 4.7 WAR, 1-time All-Star, 58 career home runs, and a .232 batting average, with a career OPS of 715 and an OPS plus of 95. So, as far as a rate basis, pretty much almost a league average offensive player, probably above league average for a catcher offensively, I would say, with that 95 OPS plus. Which is
such a strange way. That those stats are true, but it's such a weird way to look at his career, right?
Yes.
Because you have really high highs and really low lows, and then it averages out to be average, which is it's like I said, it's true, but it's just strange.
Yeah, that's a good point, because he was at the top of the mountain, and he was also down in the slums. I mean, he saw both sides of the ball, and then at the end of the day, it was pretty much came out to league average. It's quite interesting to think about.
For sure. And like you said, that ends his playing career, unfortunately, but that doesn't end his involvement with the sport. He goes on, he kind of takes you'd call it a sabbatical, I suppose. He takes a big trip with his family and just kind of clears his head for a while. And then, he's home with his kids, which is awesome. And he gets a little bored, I think. And you can't blame him. And so he ends up, he said he got on coaching the local high school team. But what he ran into was that his experience didn't necessarily translate to that current level, which I thought was interesting. And he just said what they were trying to work on, my more fine-tuned critiques just didn't apply, which is fascinating, but makes total sense.
Yes.
And so now he's coaching at Pitt, which is also ironic because he's coaching college baseball, and he never played college baseball because he was drafted out of high schools. But no doubt in my mind that he is providing incredible value to that team. Has to be providing value to the catchers, to the hitters, and even to the pitchers, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely a guy that strikes me as somebody who has a lot of wisdom for the game and knows his way around teaching catching, especially when people are close to that level as he is. So, like you said, his fine-tuned critiques can get through to them.
And one thing I want to mention about Mesoraco is as much as I wanted to be him, in 2014, I really relate to him in a kind of baseball path. You know, so in high school, I played up until COVID, and at that time, organized practice wasn't going on, right? And so I was working another job, and it got to the point where I just decided, like, I had that time off in a way that he had the time off with an injury. My skills lacked from a lack of practice. And it just got to the point where I was like, wow, the amount of work I need to put in, I just don't think I don't think I want that reward anymore. I think I'm ready for something different. And so I ended my high school career early, which, I don't regret at all, but it happened. And I was like, I think I would rather take this path in life. Yes. And I also took some time away from baseball. I didn't really pay any attention to baseball for probably a year or two. Got really into disc golf instead. Yeah. But like I was bitter is a harsh word, but my relationship with the game was different. But now I find myself repairing baseball gloves, and it's a different way that I can impact the game. And I'm eternally grateful for this opportunity. So I really relate to, even though it's two very different levels, I really relate to him in his journey and how you don't have to play the game at the highest level to still contribute and appreciate that. And I think that is a silver lining, or kind of a read between the lines way to look at his career that I don't think should go unnoticed.
I think that's very well said. It's really an interesting parallel, and I think that's why he stayed so prominent among baseball fans, because I do hear his name come up in discussions quite a bit. I think a lot of us can kind of see the parallel between his relationship with baseball and some of ours, maybe with frustrations from playing or being a fan of a certain team that struggles. And so maybe that is why he does resonate with so many baseball fans today.
Yeah, which I think that's an awesome effect to have on people and to have on the game, that he wasn't even doing consciously, but he did, and that shouldn't go unnoticed. And I appreciate, and on top of that, I appreciate him being a solid man of character to look up to for young kids. There was nothing flashy about him. He was just a really solid, hardworking, more or less uncontroversial, unless he argued with an umpire. Yeah. But yeah, a good guy to look up to, not just in the game, but in life as well. And that's one of many reasons I had to pick Devin Mesoraco as my guy to do the episode on.
Definitely. Fantastic choice. Guy who had some bad luck, but at the end of the day, definitely a pretty good baseball player in my opinion.
Absolutely. No doubt.
So, Ethan, man, it was fantastic. This was a great conversation about Devin Mesoraco. I had a ton of fun. But if other people had fun listening to this and they want to get in touch with you to repair a glove, talk some baseball, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram. If a lot of you guys are familiar with Bryce and the Pretty Good Podcast, he runs a mean Instagram account. So if you're already on there, go give me a follow at Glovehound. I haven't posted in a long time because I've been so busy, but I am trying to get back on it. So I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, a little bit on YouTube, hopefully more to come there. Find me at glovehound.com, and there's plenty of ways to get in touch with me through my website for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. And if anybody, they're curious about checking on what he's doing, particularly on Instagram, I'm sure once this episode drops, for the next week after it, we'll be collaborating on stuff, tagging each other in post, so we'll really get your name out there, man. And hopefully people will see what you're doing and give you some work if you need it.
I appreciate it, Bryce. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And guys, thank you all for listening. It's good to be back. It was super fun doing this episode. This has been the MLB Hall of Pretty Good podcast. Thank you so much, Ethan.
Thank you.